bonjour. Omashkozon stijnikas. Miskogi new in inigiendigu. Makondo dem. Onigaming dunjiba. So, in our area of Onigaming, we live by two lakes. One of the lakes is called Lake of the Woods, Ontario, and the other is Kagage Lake. They say Crow Lake, and we live in between those two lakes. And in the past, we used to be able to go to Lake of the Woods, and we would go and have our rice fields there. There's rice everywhere. There was rice everywhere, and Big Grassy, Big Island, Manitou. They also had spots on the lake, to be able to pick rice for their communities.
Over here, if you film this bay and that, well, you can't see it from the inside that bay over there, all along here, there's usually lots of rice over here. But we may get a chance to look at if there's any growth of it. But it's weedy over here, lots of weeds. There's different weeds right there. I haven't seen any growth, new growth of rice, the beginnings of rice. So,
but this used to be very
this is
plentiful.
one of the areas for rice picking. When it usually comes right up to here, and it's usually full right there. So right now you can't see nothing, and already you would have seen some of it sticking up already.
And what's the cause as to why you don't see it?
Too much water, too high. The closing and opening of dams, one in Rainy River or in Fort Frances. Usually the main ones in Fort Frances, Ontario, at the border, and then one in Kenora. So that's how they regulate the water flow.
And then what happened later on in years, they started building dams. One of the biggest dams is the Norman Dam near right on Lake of the Woods there. And every year now, for the past, I don't know how many years now, we go check the wild rice. It's almost ready to be picked. And we say, well, another week, we should be able to pick next week. And then we get there the following week. The Norman Dam and the other White Dog Dam, I think, open up, and all the wild rice is underwater. You can see it as you're canoeing by. You can see all that rice underwater.
See if there's anything at all, but I kind of doubt just what I'm not seeing out here. But all these areas are all good fishing areas. But we're talking about rice, and all these bays that I was showing you or telling you, they're always full when ricing is good, when the crop is good. And from here I can't see any rice growth. But I'm going to go in a little closer just to see. And inside the other side, there's a portage there, but for winter roads. But you could probably see if there's any growth of rice over there. So if you send your drone over there, you know what I mean? I don't know how far you can control it.
our wild rice, once we do have it, there's a whole process of laying it all out, drying it, and then there's another portion where we cook it. We roast it. We won't say cook it. We roast it. And once that process comes, and then there's a hole, somebody will dig a big hole and place that wild rice in there. And usually somebody's there with a drum singing, and the only ones that are able to dance on that wild rice are men. And once they're done dancing on that wild rice, then it's given to the women. And they have a birch bark basket, looks like a birch bark basket, and it's about yay thick. And what they'll do is they'll use the wind, and all those husks come flying off as they're doing that. And all you end up with is just the wild rice in there. And once that's done, then they bag it, and you can also pop it. So if you ever had pop rice, it is the best.
In the old days, when there was good ricing times, people would all gather together in an area like that and pitch their tents close together and leave enough room for working on rice. So there might be 4, 5 families living in that area, and then they would come and stay here instead of going back and forth to the main reserve, and they would live there with their families, and they would all rice pick in an area like this and around those bays, and back here there's bays over here, because all this would be full of rice.
And when it was time to pick that rice, one of the community members would go out on the lake with a canoe, and he may be gone for a few days to make sure all those ricing fields were ready to be picked. And when he did come back, he came back in that bay where Onigaming is, and he would have either a stick with a cloth, and he would wave his arm to let people know that it was time to harvest. It was time to harvest wild rice.
And they would have their elders regulate times when they could pick and then when to rest the rice. So they would continue to ripen. So it went like that for 3, 4 weeks. And when they got all their rice ready for the processing, they could do it right there, because they wouldn't be able to take it to the main place. So they would gather all the rice here, finish their rice, go back to the reserve, move their families there, and haul the rice later.
And then again, we would have a feast, a huge ceremony. The whole reserve would be part of this, and everybody would make something for the feast to celebrate the coming of this wild rice that we're being gifted.
The water levels were good in the old days because it was natural. There was no dams, nothing. So water controlled itself because there was openings here and there, and then water just flowed. And rice was abundant in many bays.
So they say this technology is helping the environment, but it's not helping us by flooding out our rice fields, and our people are picking up. Now we can't eat wild rice unless we buy it from another source. And what's happening now is our people are getting sugar diabetes, because they're eating out of a can. They're not eating traditional foods, and that's one of the effects of this technology, that modern technology that's coming, is flooding out our lakes.